Good morning. I'm going to start out. My name is Mark Farman. I'm Habitat Staff Specialist. Mike is going to also provide a little bit of information before we ask the Commission to adopt the list of projects. Hopefully you all got a copy of this report. If you don't, I brought a few extra. The FY14 progress reports and new FY15 duck stamp projects are listed in this. So we're going to be, staff's recommending that the Commission adopt the proposed FY15 duck stamp projects. If you turn to page 9 of the report, the new projects are listed in a table. They total $233,123. All of them, with the exception of 3 that I'm going to call out in a minute, are essentially projects that are continuing from year to year. There are 3 new projects. Mike's going to provide a little information about the first 2 at the top of the page there, Wilson and Pintail Pond improvements at Overton Wildlife Management Area. And then we're also proposing some Sprig Pond improvements at Carson Lake and Pasture. Another new project this year is the second to last one, which is geolocators for waterfowl dispersal patterns project that Staff Specialist Russell Wolstenhume is here today. He can answer questions about that. I've been told the geolocator devices are about the size of a pencil eraser. They're very small. They're put on the 3 different types of ducks with leg bands or nasal devices, nasal bands that hold on the device. And this is a follow-up to a successful Commission heritage project that you approved previously based on the data received from approximately 60 geolocators. The data was so useful, showing the movement patterns and timing of the movement, that staff is now proposing that we purchase 150 additional units. That's what this project is. So none of the labor required to capture the birds, place the units on the birds, analyze the data, none of that labor cost is included in this proposal. This proposal is just for the purchase of the hardware, if you will. So the next thing I wanted to point out is what approving this level of project spending would do to the overall budget status of the account. Is if you turn to the next page, on page 10, this table shows you the balance at the beginning of FY15 and the end of FY15, using the assumption that the full amount is approved by the Commission, and also shows you that we're assuming that a constant revenue stream of $92,440 is coming into the account. So the end result of all that would be a pretty sizable, healthy balance of $321,000 at the end of FY15 if the Commission does in fact move forward and approve all these projects as recommended. So Mike's going to give you just a real quick overview of those other 2 new projects I talked about, and then we're all available to answer any questions before you move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman Rob. Commissioners, for the record, Mike Zaratka. I'm the Wildlife Staff Specialist for NDOW. I oversee the Wildlife Management Area Program. First of all, I'll just touch on a few projects that we completed with duck stamp funds in FY14. The Overton Farming Project continues to benefit the wildlife area down south. We have approximately 120 acres in production with Stan Hardy under the current farming lease agreement. Feedback from hunters and other users has been extremely positive on the conditions of these fields. These fields provide some of the best waterfowl and dove hunting on that property. We used split funds between duck stamp and the upland game bird stamp to purchase a Polaris Ranger at the Mason Valley Wildlife Area. That's useful in noxious weed treatments and seeding of wildlife food plots. Herbicides were purchased for many wildlife areas around the state to treat noxious weeds. Many of our properties contain multiple species of noxious weeds which are listed by the Nevada Department of Agriculture. These species like tall and short whitetop, salt cedar, knapweed. As a landowner, we're required by state law to control these weeds on our properties. Funding was used to replace piping down at the Overton Wildlife Area. We're replacing open concrete ditches with 18-inch PVC pipe. This improves water conveyance efficiency and conserves water resources down there. Aquatic approved herbicides were purchased for treatments on state-managed lands for large stands of emergent vegetation, such as cattail and hardstem bulrush. Larger areas like the Mason Valley Wildlife Area and the Carson Lake and Pasture had the herbicides applied aerially by a private contractor. These herbicide treatments are then usually followed up with a prescribed burn to open up these large decadent stands. This will improve wildlife habitat and user access into these areas. We did 2 ponds at Mason Valley, Green Wing, and Swan Lake were treated and burned last year. And we did 50 acres at the upper end of Nesbitt Lake at the Key Pittman Wildlife Area last year. With these duck stamp funds, we also use NDF on these prescribed burns. So some funding was used to support their staff that they provide with the conservation crews and the fire engines that they provide for us. Moving on into the proposed fiscal year 15 stuff, the newer projects that Mark had mentioned. The wetland enhancement projects that will begin on Key Pittman Wildlife Area at the North Ponds by the office and shop, and the Overton Wildlife Area at Pintail and Wilson Ponds. These ponds on these 2 areas were created years ago without the benefit of engineering expertise, and they lack the amount of waterfowl habitat and hunting opportunity that they're capable of. So our plan is to use wetland engineering expertise from Ducks Unlimited to perform surveys on these areas and create designs that eliminate these issues and improves the habitat conditions. A lot of these ponds have overly deep areas, and in other areas that we have habitat that could be flooded that we lack that ability to. So for phase 1 of these 2 projects is only for surveying and project design of these ponds. Project construction will likely take place in fiscal year 16 or 17 once construction estimates are available and possible funding sources are identified with these projects. The other new one is out at the Carson Lake and Pasture. This project would entail cleaning approximately 1 mile of the lead drain and replace water control structures with more efficient models. This will improve water delivery efficiency and remove sediment buildup that has taken place over years on these canals. We would regrade the flow line and hopefully increase the capacity by up to 200% on this. This delivery drain would enhance about 1,200 acres on the Rice and York units out at the Carson Lake and Pasture. This project is also we're requesting state duck stamp, but it also has funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and Nevada Ducks Unlimited. So just a couple other ongoing projects that we have too at the wildlife areas. We're going to continue to replace the piping at Overton. We're going to try to extend that pipeline all the way down to Pintail Pond. And once again, we have the projects lined up to purchase herbicide and spray emergent vegetation at many wildlife areas around the state, and then follow up with the prescribed burning as well. So that's the overviews that I had.
Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Drew?
I was able to get around to a couple of the cabs this month, and one of the questions that came up, and maybe you could address it for me just a little bit, is specifically to Mason Valley and the well pumping projects. And I guess the point that was made is that more of an operational cost versus a project cost? And I'll pose the question to you, and then if the cab wants to further that point, they can, but maybe you could give us a little better description of those projects.
Those various pumping projects, what that is the funding that we're requesting is for electrical charges that happen when we turn these wells on. We're able to move water around the Mason Valley area is a large area, almost 18,000 acres now. So to move the water from the fish hatchery, which is where a lot of the water from the area comes from is the continual pumping at the state fish hatchery. These wells, and it's underground pumping, and then also transfer of this water to the east side series ponds. So what the funding does is pays our electrical costs to operate these wells.
And I guess maybe any comment on the thought of this coming out of kind of this project pot of money versus an operational pot?
Okay.
Alan, Division Chief, and I, and Mike have had a number of discussions, and this is the first year we've actually dropped a few smaller projects. We're kind of moving in that direction where we can, over time, hopefully pick up more of the smaller routine projects as part of our base operating budget, which is funded by the federal grant that pays for the WMA system. However, in the near term, we decided to keep some of these mid-range ones that are a little more expensive for two reasons. One, Mike hasn't had a chance to budget the increased costs into any new grant budgets because we have to plan quite a ways in advance, one budget year at a time. The second reason is the cost of these was a little bit higher than the smaller cost items that we dropped out. There was probably 4 or 5 weed spraying, purchase of herbicide. So we have moved some of the smaller projects into the base operating budget. In the old days, they called those level A projects.
Right.
These are called level B projects for that reason. So we do recognize that. And then the other thing to keep in mind is one of the reasons these are here in the first place is it's very important for NDOW to provide a matching source for the grant funding. As you probably know, we have to come up with 25%. So that's another constant thing we look at is what are our opportunities for matching? And right now, these are important sources for matching.
Okay.
But
And
we
those
are-
projects
we are-
will all
we-
apply.
Right, all of them apply, and we do recognize a need over the long term to move towards level B projects that are more unique and not routine operational items.
Okay.
So we're kind of moving in that direction, but it's going to be a slow process.
I appreciate the explanation, and kind of something you said leads me into my second question. That's on the noxious weeds. I think last year we had a lot more noxious weed projects proposed, and so I guess my question becomes, were we able to get a little better handle on that by dealing with those projects, and now we're more in a maintenance mode where we were able to knock it back?
Well, Mike can elaborate on that, but my understanding is that those projects are not going away. They've been moved to the base operating budget, which is paid for by the federal grant.
Right.
So I don't think the fact that they're not here is a reflection of we don't need to do it again because it's been so successful in the past. I
Sure.
think it's a recurring annual challenge.
And I understand there's a maintenance cost to that. I guess my question is more in what we were able to do over the last couple of years, have we at least been able to get ahead of it to where we're not playing catch-up, where we're playing more maintenance on?
To answer that, I would say, yeah, we're getting a handle. I mean, as you know, with noxious and invasive weeds, there'll never be an end to it, but yeah, we're maintaining and making progress, definitely.
Thank you.
Commissioner McNinch?
Mr. Chairman, so Mike or Mark, I'm not sure which one you would answer, but I have, all the times I've read over these, I've never noticed, there's a note here on the wood duck project in particular about the 3% overhead for Nevada Waterfowl Association. And has that been part of the money that comes from the duck stamp fund? Have we paid overhead costs for NGOs in the past, or what's the answer?
I do not know the answer to that as far as previous years. Hopefully Russell does. Russell works with Dr. Nikolai to fine-tune those costs, so that's a good question. I don't know if this is the first time or not.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, Russ, I was just asking, for the first time I noticed there's a comment in here, and maybe I've read over it before and just never clicked, but it says for the wood duck project in particular, I think there was one other place, but it mentioned that the total request included a 3% overhead to Nevada Waterfowl.
Yeah. Russell Wilson, Department of Wildlife. That 3%'s always been in there. Actually, a couple of years ago, it was 5%. And NWA has dropped that down to 3%. And essentially what that is the entire wood duck project is being done through the University of Nevada, Reno. They charge the department 17.5% on any contract that we do with them. Working with Dr. Nikolai on this and Nevada Waterfowl Association, we kind of found a loophole, a way around that. The university doesn't charge an NGO any overhead. And so we contract with NWA, who in turn contracts with the university to do the work rather than us doing it directly. So we're kind of going around the system to avoid the 17.5% charges. But we've agreed over the years to pay NWA a small amount because it does create paperwork for them. They have to get all the paperwork from UNR and then compile that and recreate an invoice monthly for us to send to us, and then we send the money to them, and then they have to write a check to the university. And it's a little more cumbersome, but it saves us money in the long run. Is why that's there.
Well, I appreciate the explanation on that. It has less to do with money going to NWA than it is just to make sure that we're, that what we're doing isn't going to get us in hot water somewhere. I mean, we're going to get that back from Nevada Waterfowl at some point. I mean, they've got 5,300 dedicated to this alone. So
Sure.
So I'm not worried about that part of it. I just just something that I hadn't noticed before, and
Yeah, it's been on there pretty much for the life of the project, and said it has gone down. I have talked in the past with NWA's presidency about that thing, and they've indicated to me that it isn't that big of an issue, and if we really pushed it, they would be happy to drop it. But mostly it's a pacifier to their accountant who does all the paperwork mostly. So he spends a lot of time keeping the paperwork up on this. So
Commissioner Bliss.
Thank you, Chairman Rob. First of all, I'd like to commend you guys on how well this is put together, and neat, nice, and a lot of good information, and I sure appreciate it. I have seen some that wasn't quite as smooth and put together, and so I very much appreciate this. But my next question is on the Stepple Valley management area there at the 3C Ranch. I know shortly after that was purchased, there was some duck ponds put in and a few things done like that, but driving by there as often as I do, it seems like there's not a lot else going on, and maybe I am missing it, but it seems to me that it's a heck of a facility and that we're not utilizing. We got good water with the, coming from Steptoe Creek and through Cummins Lake, and then that property was always traditionally farmed. There's ditch banks and where they flood irrigated and everything else. I'm curious if there has been, or if there's plans in the future to do some more farming and put some grain fields in. I think it'd be a huge benefit to the waterfowl stuff as well as upland game, and maybe start utilizing that. It's kind of a sore spot because we got a fantastic lake that grows giant fish with no fish in it because of our issue with the pike and the mercury, and then we got this land that's set up to be utilized, and I don't see a lot getting done, and I was just curious if there's plans to do it or if there's a reason why there's not.
Yeah, I can answer that. Mike Zaratka, again, Department of Wildlife. Prior to this staff position, I moved to Reno about a year ago, and the previous 6 years I was actually at the Steptoe Valley Wildlife area as the supervisor. And the first part of your comment was, yes, we developed 13 ponds with the help of DU, which was completed in 2009. So over the last few years, that's the majority of our work was establishing vegetation and water management in those ponds. We're finally getting caught up on that. I mean, we have soil stabilization now. And then we're moving on to the other stuff, which is not necessarily getting back into farming, but we're trying to kind of get the natural native vegetation established back in some of those fields that were under agriculture in the past. We don't have any plans to do, like I said, any farming, but we are putting in what we call micro food plots, an acre to 5 acres on some of those fallow fields that you may be seeing. Was there anything else I missed?
Well, I'm not really interested in the farming aspect of it, but I think there could be bigger food plots and maybe some more stuff to. I mean, I think it could be a great place that maybe we could. I know this is the duck stamp part, the duck stuff, but I mean, a place for upland birds and I just think we might be able to do a little more there than what has been where it's sitting now. And the reason I ask it is because there's some folks that I know that live right there in Ely and in White Pine County that have the concerns with it, that we got a fantastic facility there and they don't feel like it's getting utilized.
What I would recommend is you take your good ideas and work with Mike and the current staff supervisor there and develop what we would call a new level B project proposal. And it's common for us to co-fund projects that benefit both duck, waterfowl, and upland game birds with both accounts, so you kind of share the costs, and we can also maybe pitch in some grant money. So there's nothing that would prevent us from creating a new project that would benefit wildlife there. It's just a matter of getting it designed in time for next year's funding cycle, and there's plenty of time. So I would encourage you to pursue that with staff.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that opportunity, and I would look forward to doing it and learning more about how you guys go about doing that as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Drew.
Russell, since you came up, you kind of sparked a question. Lion Cab, who wasn't able to send a representative to this meeting, had some questions on the geolocators in terms of how that will benefit our knowledge and future management of waterfowl use going forward. And also, what's our capture rate, given I think you have to actually either harvest the bird or recapture in order to get the data off of that. So they had some questions in regards to that, and I don't know that there's a more cost-effective or better way to capture that same data, but maybe you could speak to those couple of concerns since they're not here to ask that question.
And no problem. Russell Olson with the department. For the last year or so, the flyway system, all 4 flyways, have been having a pretty in-depth discussion about the midwinter inventory survey. It's a survey that's been going on waterfowl across the continent for the last 80 years. It's the longest running string of data on waterfowl there is. But the fact of the matter is that particular survey, while it's very long-lived and it gives us kind of a nice picture of what's on the landscape during a prime wintering time of the year, it's not very biologically robust. And so given that and the fact that over the last 3 years there's been a number of lives lost conducting that survey. Fish and Wildlife Service lost a ship with a pilot and 2 biologists in it. Idaho lost a ship on that survey and lost a pilot and a biologist. And given those losses, there's just been a lot of questions like why do we continue to fly this time of year that's very treacherous to fly, low elevation flights. The weather's frequently uncooperative, and so they've been looking at a lot of